Let us pray. Father, teach us your word. Help us to love it and to obey it, to live it in our lives, so that we may be full of your joy and overflowing to a hurting and lost world. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, now we are at chapter 4, and we're going to look at, read chapter 4, and really and truly, we only need two persons. So one to read verses 1 to 8, and the other person to read 9 to the end. So who wants to give it a shot? Lorraine,
okay.
1 to 8?
Yeah, because
Lorraine
you'll have to tell me when to stop because
you will stop at verse 8. I don't know what yours end with, but the verse 8 ends with, my verse 8 ends with, and he told him to urge her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. I don't know if you see where that is.
That's the problem. My book doesn't give you.
Oh, okay. Well, I will tell you when you get there.
Sure.
No problem.
Okay.
And who wants to start verse 9? Okay, Pam will read verse 9 to the end. Okay, let us begin then. Go ahead, Lorraine.
When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in the sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's maid and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs assigned to attend her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and explain to her, and he told him to urge her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people.
Right there.
Okay.
Thank you. Your book, you have an NIV because yours is reading the same way as mine.
And mine.
Yeah, it is a new international version.
Yeah, new international version. Yeah. Yes, it reads the same way as mine. Go. Thank you, Lorraine. Go ahead, Pam.
Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a message for Mordecai, saying, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may that person live. I myself have not been called to come to the king for 30 days. When they told Mordecai what Esther had said, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter, but you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. Then Esther said in reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast as you do. After that, I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, Pam. Now, as we begin chapter 4, all the main characters are named. Xerxes, and Vashti, Mordecai and Esther and Haman. And we are at a point where Esther has been queen for a while. We know that when Vashti was banished, it took the king 4 years before Queen Esther was crowned. And then it took another 4 years before we learned of the plot to destroy, Haman's plot to destroy the Jews. So we know that she has been on the throne for quite some time, and it is believed that she would have adjusted to royal life by then, that she was probably being pampered, and that she was probably also isolated from the rigors of common life, the realities of common life, that, you know, she was once a woman of common life, but now being a royal for so many years, she may have been at this point getting not used to the common life any longer. And so we find that she is enjoying the royal life, we believe, and her staff's primary goal is to give her the royal treatment. Now, what will happen as we come to chapter 4 is her isolation and her charmed life, if you want to call it that, will come to a screeching halt when she receives word about her adopted dad's behavior, about Mordecai's behavior outside of the palace gate. And so in chapter 4, we begin with verses 1 to 3. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and the order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Now, if we remember when we completed last week, chapter 3, we know that the edict was sent out to all the provinces and the places. We also know that there was great confusion and bewilderment among the city of Susa, the people of Susa. We know that the king and Haman were both breaking it out with a few drinks and celebrating, so to speak. And also, as we come now to chapter 4, the Jews are in mourning. And how could they not be? Because they've just seen an edict posted that they would be annihilated. Yes, the time is, as Pam drew reference at one, I think last week, that there's some time before it happens. But at the same time, because I think it was maybe almost a year before it happens, but at the same time, they would have adjusted to life in Susa, and now they will have to try to go back to where they were, and there's no guarantee, because where they came from is also part of the Persian Empire, and therefore it is no guarantee that they will not be killed there. So the edict was for the whole empire, not just for around Susa. So that is where we are at, where the Jews are in mourning. They're about to be killed, and obviously they're afraid of what is going to take place, and that is where they're at. And what we see here is that the Jews have gotten into what they're best at, and that is they're wearing sackcloth and ashes, which is the dress of sorrow, the dress of bereavement, the dress of grief. They're crying out, they're fasting, which is something that they normally are good at doing when they are crying out to God to help them. So it is a kind of an attire in times of grief, but it's also an attire when in times of crisis, and they are in a crisis situation at this point. And Mordecai leads the crisis statement in terms of he is doing it bitterly and loudly, and he is going right outside the king's gate to do this, wearing his sackcloth and ashes. Anyone remember, not you, Pam, or you, Bryce, but anyone remembers where else do we normally hear about sackcloth and ashes when we read scriptures? Anyone remember? Where do you hear about sackcloth and ashes, or what day of the year do you hear about it? Or
Ash Wednesday.
I told you, not you, Bryce.
Sorry about that, Father.
Yes, on Ash Wednesday during Lent, we hear of the whole notion of sackcloth and ashes. So here is. We see in verses 1 to 3 that Mordecai tore his clothes. He puts on these sackcloth and ashes. He's wailing, he's crying loudly, and he's doing it bitterly. And you could see this is being contrast in just the previous verse where we hear the king and Haman sat down to drink. And so you see this mourning from Mordecai versus the joy of Haman getting what he wants. We also see as well that the Jews are going to be fasting during this period, and it's contrast with, although the city is in bewilderment, the Persians are still eating and drinking and having their feasts, and whereas the Jews that are living there have now gone into fasting, no food at all. And the whole notion of Mordecai wearing the dress of grief, when he learns of Haman's edict to destroy the Jews, the whole notion, his whole public humility follows his open refusal to bow down to Haman. So, as I've said, sackcloth and ashes were the attire of mourners. And here we find that the Jews are now mourning greatly throughout the kingdom of Persia. One of the other things that we have to also realize is that sackcloth and ashes is also, when you wear that, it is a means of repentance. Whenever the Jews were disobedient, wherever they wanted to turn back to God from their disobedience and become obedient, this was their way of showing their repentance.
Yeah, but it's not just openly. The Jews, the Christians have done it too.
Say that again, Bryce.
The Christians have done it too, and so has the Muslims. They all religions have done it.
Yeah, but I'm talking about how they do it. And we as Christians don't wear sackcloth and ashes. So, but the Jews do. And that's the point I'm trying to make. Yeah, but I'm just saying is that
we've all made mistakes. We've all done the wrong thing.
Yes, and that is true. That is very true. So, but the Jews, they wear their sackcloth and ashes to show their form of repentance to God. And so we can see that as a means of repentance as well. It also, we can also say that this whole notion of repentance is something that is important for them, because it is quite possible that the Jews may have been wondering, what have we done to deserve this? And therefore, in case that they believe that God was doing it to them because they were disobedient, it is also a form of also repenting to him during this time. Mm-hmm. Now, when we go into verse 4 to 8, we read, when Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, assigned to her to attend her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and explain it to her. And he told him to urge her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. So here we see that Mordecai's behavior at the gate gains the attention of Esther's servants, who in turn tells her. Now, we are not sure if they knew who Mordecai was or is, or if they knew that he had some connection to Esther. It could have been probably simply a situation where they could have been talking and saying, oh, well, they got this man out there crying and keeping a lot of noise outside the palace gate. And they could have gotten into a conversation to find out who he was and found out that he was Mordecai or what have you. But at this point in time, we cannot say for sure that they knew that Mordecai was connected to Esther at this point. But what we see happening is that instead of finding out why he was dressed this way, Esther decides to send him clothes and he refuses them. And one of the things, as I said to the group this morning, I said, it is interesting that she didn't see for herself and she was getting news from her servants, but it is interesting that she did not realize that he may have been wearing sackcloth and ashes, which means that there was something up. And because she herself would probably have worn them at some point in time if they were, or at least seen it worn or have heard that they were be worn if at some point in time. But she apparently did not realize that. And so we see Mordecai refusing the clothes that she sent for him, and therefore then decided, I need to investigate this further because there's more to it than that. And that is when she decides to send Hathach to go and find out what is troubling Mordecai. All this time, again, she has not disclosed her nationality, and therefore she continues.
Her religion.
She keeps that, and her religion, she keeps that under wraps. Now, Mordecai was unashamed to put aside his facade and appear weak and broken. And you can tell that he practices self-control in the sense that he goes up to the palace gate and he knows and he's respectful of the king and the king's environs, that when you're wearing sackcloths, you're not to go inside the king's palace environs. And so he doesn't do that. He remains outside the gate. So there's great self-control. He's being respectful to the rules that are in place, and even in the midst of the grief that he's experiencing. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that we have to be aware of is that Esther is ignorant of the disaster that is about to happen to her people. And it tells us a lot about her, that she is in the palace, that she is sheltered. It also tells us that she doesn't even know what her husband is doing over on the other side of the palace. And therefore, she doesn't know what is happening, and her servants seem now to know more than she does, and therefore we have that dynamic as well. One of the other things that we realize in these verses is that she sends Hathach, which means that she does not go out herself. So she does not reveal her identity as a Jew. She does not say, well, let me go and see what's happening to Mordecai. Maybe she couldn't. We don't know. But obviously she doesn't. The messages that she's getting from her cousin are being brought to her through her servant. Let me see if there's anything I wanted to mention in that. Now, what we see coming out here is that that when she sends Hathach as a messenger to find out the reason for Mordecai's behavior, Mordecai's explanation is very descriptive. He is so descriptive that he even knows the amount of money that that Haman plans to put into the treasury. And even we could say even emphasizing that Haman attempt to bribe the king in telling him that he will put money into the treasury. The text doesn't tell us, it doesn't tell us how Mordecai knows the details of Haman's conversation with the king, but he obviously knows quite a lot because he knows what's happened. He knows the exact amount of money that is promised, and he is even in possession of a copy of the decree, which may not be too difficult because it would have been posted all through the various provinces, but he got a copy. The only thing I don't understand is there were no photocopying machines in those days, so he probably took down one of them. He probably took down one of them and took it, which should have been still up. But what we do know is that Hathach is able to relate his Mordecai's personal experience and knowledge of what is going on, and he wants Esther to know what is happening to her people. And what we find here then when we read verse 8, which is a pretty lengthy verse, is that Mordecai gives Hathach a copy of the edict. And he wants him to show Esther. And he also makes a request of her that she is to go and beg for her people. Now remember, all along, Mordecai always told Esther not to reveal your identity as a Jew, religious or national, it doesn't matter. Don't reveal your identity. And here now, for the first time in verse 8, Mordecai sends message to Esther that it's time for you to reveal your identity. Mordecai says he also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and explain it to her. And he told him to urge her to go into the king's presence, to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. And so now we have a situation where she is now to reveal her identity because this is crisis time, this is crunch time. And Mordecai tells her she needs to do this. So that's a new development in this chapter, where all along no one knew who she was, her identity was. Now she is about to reveal, or she's being asked to reveal her identity. Then we come to verse 9, which is we see another development in the book, in this chapter in the book, and particularly happening in this chapter. We will see in verse 11 that Esther speaks for the first time. We have recorded words of which Esther speaks. Before, up to now, she has not spoken. We have no recorded words of what she has said. Now we have her first recorded words. All the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that he be put to death. The only exception is for the king to extend the golden scepter to him and spare his life. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. So here is it now that we have a quote that directly comes from her. We haven't heard from her speaking in the past. Now we're hearing it for the first time. And Esther wants Mordecai to know that it is the king alone who initiates his audiences, and to appear before the king without an invitation could result in her death, could possibly result in her death. And for some unknown reason, Esther is even worried about it because she mentions it, that she has not been summoned by the king for quite some time. And the verse says 30 days So she has not been to see the king. She doesn't even know if he's growing a beard now or cut off his beard or whatever the case may be. She has no clue maybe in that regard. Now, so Esther's reaction and really her first words in the text, and it's interesting because we are going to see in this very same chapter, Esther's going to change from words of fear to words of courage. And it all happens in chapter 4. Here we are seeing her being fearful, and maybe some may say she's lacking faith. There's this hesitation to risk her life to meet Mordecai's assertion that inaction will result in death for her and her family and the people, the rest of the Jews. And so she is fearful. And we see that in verse 11. So then when we move on to verse 12, we see here and following, we see here when Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, and these words being the one that she's fearful and that she shouldn't go to the king unless he summoned her, Mordecai sends back this answer to her. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this. And here we see Mordecai is reminding Esther that, the king's palace is not a place of refuge for you. Yeah, and you can hear in her words, in his words, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. And I was even saying this morning that it's almost like a threat to her, even sometimes, and I think Pam mentioned this morning, it is almost like when you're speaking to your kids. Do not think that because you are blah, 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 I can't whack you across your head, sort of thing. And so remember that this is Mordecai, an older man, speaking to this young girl, although she is the queen. And I say young girl because this morning someone asked if one of the members asked if we had any idea as to how old she was, and we believe that at this time she could have been somewhere between 18 and 21 probably. There's some record of her being married to Xerxes from the age of 14. So
wait a minute, that's way too young to get married.
Well, it is, but so there is some folks, so it is possible that she could be in her early 20s by this time, and I believe that's where she would be, but it isn't that important. The matter is that she is the hi Elita, she is fearful, and so Mordecai is still talking to her almost like if she's a child, because she has grown up with him as like a child. And also too, we find that, and then this is how I felt too, where I say it seems even more threatening, is that Mordecai tells her in verse 14, now listen, if you don't do this, someone else is going to take your place to do it for us. God is going to put someone else in place. That's what he's saying. God is going to put someone in place to deliver us. And if you don't do it, when you think that you're going to be okay, you and your father's family are not going to be okay. Y'all are the ones that will perish. We will not. And so we see this whole striking this Mordecai is really exercising this kind of desperation kind of tactics to coerce her and to make sure she speaks to the king to stop this, this destruction from happening to them. And so much so that he ends it in verse 14 when he says, and who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this. In other words, Mordecai is recognizing the providence of God by suggesting that the deliverance of the Jews could well be the reason why she was elevated to the position of queen at this very time. In other words, she's serving a purpose. This is your purpose now, Esther. We want you to stand up for us. And as I have also said to you all, always see yourselves when you're reading this book, this story in Esther, to look at these things, because here is it, and apply them to yourself, because here is it. This is Mordecai believes that God has put her here for a purpose, and this is the purpose. And as I said to the group this morning, God has put all of us here for a purpose. Sometimes we don't know what that is, and sometimes we get to know what that is. Sometimes we can figure it out for ourselves. Sometimes it takes someone else to figure it out for us. But the thing is, as long as we are alive, even if we are bedridden, there is always still a purpose. I always believe that once you're alive, there is a purpose for us still being alive, that God has a purpose for us. So here we see Mordecai is saying to Esther, this is your purpose. And he's urging her not to give way to fear, but rather to seek the fulfillment of the call that God has placed on her life. That God has called you for this time, and you need to have faith. You need to stop being fearful and to do what God has called you to do, so that God's plan will be accomplished. And he even saying to her, and he even says to her when he talks about that God will put someone else in her place if she doesn't do it. His whole notion is that God's plan will be accomplished. It will be accomplished with you or without you, but God's plan is going to be accomplished. And that is sometimes, it makes me smile, because sometimes people think, well, you can't do without me. And I am thinking, and I always say, God will put someone else in place. It is, and I even said it this morning in my reflection. I had a bishop who used to say, it is not about us, it is about God. It is not about us, it is about God. And if we get in the way, God will put somebody else in place. And so we have this whole notion of what Mordecai is saying to Queen Esther, and so in that particular section, he's saying you need to obey God, because once you are obedient to God, He will make the plan happen the way it should. If you are faithful to God, He will make it happen. And so we see here that that Mordecai has a strong faith. He has a strong confidence that the Jews will be delivered with or without Esther, because he trusts God's sovereignty to work purposes out for them and to fulfill his promises. And so he believes that they will be delivered by one means or the other. The only thing is, I question is, why do you have to say that Esther's family and her will be destroyed when there too are Jews, and you will hope that everybody, if possible, could have been saved? But I think that's scary tactics by Mordecai to get her to do what he wants her to do. And then we come to verse 15 and to the end. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will fast as you do. When that is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. So here we see that by the end of this chapter, Esther, who was fearful in terms of going before the king because she needs to be summoned in order to go, or she could be killed, now builds the courage. Now her faith is strengthened, and she is courageous now to go before the king, and she is prepared to become a martyr if she has to be. She's prepared to put her life on the line, and what we see here is that she accepts the mission which Mordecai gives her. She takes the initiative, but at the same time, she does what again is a very Jewish practice, and that is when there is a crisis, you go into a fast and prayer session. And you do that over a period of time. And so she tells Mordecai, you need to get all the people that are Jews in Susa to be praying for me, and that I am going to do the same thing. My maids are going to do the same thing. You all have to do the same thing. So, and what they're doing is that they're praying, they're petitioning to God, that God will deliver them, but not only that, but that God will put Esther in the safe hands, and that she will not meet her death, and that is important for her. So you know, and as we know, the book of Esther is known for this verse. I will go to the king even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. There is no better phrase that captures Esther's fearless move of courage and faith than that particular line, where she is willing to experience or suffer martyrdom on behalf of her people. Now, so we see now that Esther is becoming more of a woman. She's becoming more vocal. She's not that fearful, timid young lady anymore. She's blossoming into a courageous woman who has a voice, who can speak, and who we will see has a way of getting around her husband and Haman too, and using her poise and her tact and her faith and her courage to bring about some semblance of alleviating any destruction that is to take place. So that is how we end in chapter 4, and in chapter 7, in verse 17, another new development happens. Now, this is the third one in the same chapter. Remember, the first one is that she can reveal her identity in verse 8, when Mordecai told her to go to the king and plea on behalf of her people. Then we see in verse 11 that she speaks. She has a voice. We have recorded words coming out of her mouth. And now at the end in verse 17, so Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. Now Esther is the one giving the instructions to Mordecai. Mordecai was the one doing it all along. Now she is telling him what to do. And so there's a reversal in the roles between her and Mordecai. She is now taking the initiative, becoming the controlling character. And you can see that even develop more in the book. And it is Mordecai who is obeying her orders. And this is where we find chapter 4 ends. Any questions? Any questions from anyone?
Nope.
Not a question.
Elita. Yes.
Not a question, but an observation. Esther has really grown into her role as a queen.
Yes.
Which I don't think her husband ever did. I mean,
that is
he's
true.
Very malleable. And
that is true.
Has
You're right.
really grown into her role and accepted her responsibility. And it's nice to see.
Yes, and that is very true. That is very, very true. And you are even correct when you said that she does that even more than her husband does it. Because he's still like one of these playboy kind of kings who's loosey-goosey in his head
yes, exactly.
and this sort of stuff. So you are absolutely correct. That is a very good observation. Very good observation.
Are you saying that that Xerxes is a troublemaker and gets himself in trouble?
I'm not saying that he's a troublemaker. I'm not saying he's a troublemaker. I don't think he's a troublemaker. I just think that he does not have a mind of himself.
So he doesn't listen to people, period.
No, that's not. No, he listened to them. He listened to them too much, I think.
He doesn't think for himself.
He doesn't think for himself.
He's easily led.
Yes, he's easily led. He's easily manipulated.
Yes.
He cannot think for himself.
And even by Esther, he's easily led by Esther.
Yes.
Last week, I said, but you don't have to be smart.
I did. Oh yes, you said that last week, Maureen. You could be a king, but you don't have to be smart.
You could be a king, you could be a prophet, but you don't necessarily have to be smart enough.
Right, and that is because you get it by being in line to the throne. That's why. Whoever that is, whether they're smart or whether they're ignorant, it is who is in line to the throne at the time.
Yeah.
And he was. And as I had said it earlier too, it appears that Vashti had a strong hold on him as well. And she used to, I don't know, I guess, she had a way of doing it, but it is believed that she had a great influence on the throne as well. So he is one of these loosey-goosey kind of guys who anything goes. I mean, you even pull off your ring and give it to you pull off your power and give it to this man. I mean, just like that, and he's okay with that. But it is one of these things. So we will see now in chapter 5 that Esther is going to go before the king and how that all turns out there. There was something else I wanted to mention, and I am not I don't and no one tells though, talking about courage, if we look at Vashti as well, Vashti was a courageous woman. She refused to go to the king, which in those days would have been also a no. She did not go to him. And the thing is about it is, we got a contrast here, because Esther is not summoned, but she will go without being summoned. And Vashti was summoned and she refuses to go. So, here we have this whole contrast again, even with his two wives. And the book has a lot of contrast in it as well. So we see that playing out here as well. Okay, you get an early night. It's 10 to 7. You can get dinner a little earlier if you haven't yet.
I already have my dinner, please.
All right. Well, everyone, have a good night, and it's good to see you all. Yes, Iris. Unmute yourself, Iris, please.
Did you make a decision on what we were doing for when we're doing the painting?
Today we were talking about that. Good question. Today we were we didn't really talk about it. They believe that they will get it finished, that we can go ahead and still have class. because it doesn't start till 3 and goes till 5. And we usually on Wednesday finish class around 12:30. So it gives them more than enough time. And Louisa, who's the chair, doesn't think it will take more than an hour to get set up. So they don't even plan to get there to set up till about 1:30 to 2 to set up is what they were thinking of doing. So my whole thing is once we put the tables back after the morning Bible study class, then it's just a matter of them covering them and so forth. So my plan is to have the class in the morning and in the evening. Sorry, Elite.
Are there still tickets available for the?
Yes. Oh, yes. So after church on Sunday, you just need to, they're selling them in the booth. Okay. And it's interesting. We announced today, and I don't think I'm telling any stories out of thing, but at the meeting today, we have already have 30 people signed up for it, which I think is remarkable, especially when we needed to have at least 10, and we've gotten 30, and it's only been 2 weeks, and we still got just under a month more. Well, maybe 3 weeks more. Well, what date is it? The 17th, right? Right. So we still got almost another month.
Yeah.
To still sell some more tickets, and I think they printed either 70 50. Or 80 or
no, I think 50. They were
50 or something. 50. Right, but I think if we get to 50, that is because also what is they're thinking of is since there's only one instructor, it might be too big. You don't want it to be too large a group for just one person. So if you want to come, get your tickets right away so that you'll be a part of that 50 because, well, you got to be part of the 20 left now because there are already 30 persons. Yes, Iris.
I want to sit next to Lorraine because Lorraine is such a beautiful artist. So I'm going to sit next to Lorraine and she can give ideas.
Oh, you sit next to Lorraine. You heard that, Lorraine?
Yes, she's beautiful.
Lorraine, Iris wants to sit next to you because you're such a beautiful artist.
Oh, I'm not going to be coming, and I don't paint with that. I paint with watercolors, I don't know how to paint the kind of paint.
Yeah, she paints for watercolor, but that doesn't mean that you can't come, though.
And Iris, I wouldn't be able to paint on a glass what I painted for you with the pansies and the teacups.
Yeah. The iris.
Oh, yeah. No, I wouldn't be able to do that on
glass. Okay.
Yeah, it is good. But I still think you should come, Lorraine. You should probably come and see what is playing because we have a lot. I will tell you this: we have between like 8 and 10, if my mind serves me correctly, between 7 and 10 artists in the church. Yeah. We have a lot of folks who, and I have seen some of their work. I have seen Lorraine's work, beautiful work. I have seen some of Barbara Watlin's work. Beautiful work. I have seen Margaret Coughlin. Her work, she also does beautiful work. And there are more artists in the church. Karen Bonney is an artist.
Yeah, have you seen any of her work?
I have not seen her work yet. But Karen Bonney is an artist. I'm trying to remember. They're like at least 2 other persons that I know about.
Waters, what's her name?
Oh yes, of course, Chris. I've seen Chris's work. Yeah. So I have seen now about 4 of the work of members of our congregation, and I am impressed with their work. These ladies are good. Trust me, they are good. And they paint in different medias because Lorraine is watercolor and some of them are acrylics and all sorts of stuff. And they're really good work, doing excellent work.
Well, Karen Bonney and Margaret Coughlin, that's how both of them came to All Saints. They were painting down in the log cabin on our Tuesday group. And Barbara Watling, talked about All Saints, and so they came and tried it out, and they're still here.
Wow, nice. I mean, a thought just came to my head. I feel that the artists in the church should do an exhibition. I really feel so. Maybe put some of their work up and put it on the calendar next year. I really do, because we need to bring that out. At least it will make me try to do something so I could show something as well, instead of working all the time. So we may even, don't be surprised if I put something on the calendar for next year saying an art show by our members or something, because I think that would be wonderful, because I am impressed. Totally impressed.
The only problem with watercolors is that I don't frame anything. You have to frame watercolors.
Yes,
and it's very expensive. So.
Well, but not necessarily. If somebody wants to buy it, they frame it. And
that's it. You'd have to sell it.
You have to frame it, and right,
yeah,
exactly, and let them frame it, and you can do that.
Somebody can help you with matting.
Yeah. Yes, and that body is talking to you. That is true. So. No, I mean, that thought just came to my head. But Lorraine, you need to tell me who the others are, because I just call about 5 of them or something, but I know there are more.
I don't know of the others beyond what there is another lady who's real professional, Karen Louise Calisant, but she doesn't come to church anymore. Her and her mother used to come every Sunday. They'd come to 8 o'clock. And they were real, and the mom was real active across the street with Janet and them. And she's quite a gardener also. She lives over in Rio, and she is a very good, she does landscapes, and she's so good that she has had a show up at the Beanie Bacchus, forget what's, up in
But you know, that is, I mean, if she used to come to our church, if somebody could reach out to her and say to her, we are thinking of having an art show, and we would like, of our members, we would like you to be a part of it. You never know.
She doesn't come to All Saints anymore, though, that I know of. I think her mother finally passed away, but she is a real professional artist. She sells her artwork for, quite a bit of money. So anyway, that's the only other one I know of.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Those do a show like that of past and present members of the church.
Yeah, could do that too. I think we should do something though. I think we have too many artists just to let them just fade away into oblivion. And I think we should really put their art on display, because trust me, I'm not saying it for saying its sake. The work that I have seen is really good work. And I think that we need to feature that and to have that up. All right. God bless you, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye. Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
See you. Thank you, Pam, for hosting again. Bye.
Bye.
Let's see if I turn that on.